All right, Joe, I have pushed the proverbial red button. So right now, so here's the cool thing you got to understand. When I push this red button, your life is forever changed because now, my man, you're a Texas Titan. How's it feel?
I feel blessed and honored, my man.
Well,
This is huge.
I am very honored and very grateful that you would take this time out of your day to share your story with me and the Texas Titan audience. I'm so grateful, and I'm ready to dig into this because, like I said before, I mean, man, I'm kind of like this closeted, wannabe guy in the fashion industry, and so. What really spawned this, I've been watching you for a while. I'm watching what you've done, especially with your work with veterans, entrepreneurship, and the fact that you are in the apparel business.
Sure.
And you work with cool brands. I mean, Mizzen and Main, it doesn't get much cooler than that.
No.
Save the Duck, really cool brand. Both of those brands, where I live in Tyler, so Racket and Jog is a big Save the Duck
Sure, yeah, they're big
retailer.
Fans. Oh, yeah.
Which is also the same thing as Tyler's, Austin. And then Mizzen and Main, those guys, I mean, when you were there and beyond, they've just crushed it. And I still remember, so this is kind of funny. I'm just putting this together. So Tim Ferriss was my muse for doing a podcast. The first podcast I ever
4-Hour
subscribed to.
Work Week, right? Yeah.
That's right. So it's funny. That's how I found him. So I read the 4-Hour Work Week, and then I'd never listened to a podcast in my life, and I stumbled across the Tim Ferriss show. And I'm like, oh, that's the guy that wrote that book.
Yeah.
And that was the first ever podcast I listened to, subscribed to it, and now here he is, 300 million downloads later. And Mizzen and Main was one of the very first sponsors that Tim ever had, and so that's where I learned about Mizzen and Main.
There's actually a really interesting story that goes along with that.
Well, talk to me.
So one, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
The interesting story is in the early days, I had known Kevin, the founder and current chairman at Mizzen and Main, for years prior through politics and other friends, and we kind of met and things advanced, and we had an opportunity to work together. The mission and drive behind it was so strong, I had to do it. And I actually left politics for it, which was huge. And I know you and I were both in politics at the time.
Yep.
On separate sides of the same hill.
Yep.
But you in the Senate and I in the House. Mm-hmm. But we had just moved into our first office / showroom space over in the design district. And Kevin, I was under all kinds of just monumental pressure, some from himself, but mostly just, we had just raised our first Series A, and we were trying to get everything aligned and operations. I was director of operations at the time, and which basically meant I wore like 9 hats along with everybody else because we were doing everything. There's only 4 of us at the time.
Yep.
So everybody's doing everything, and everybody played a pivotal role in getting everything done. But Kevin had so much pressure on himself, but also to make sure that he got it right for everybody else. Because Kevin was always that selfless guy that was looking out for everybody else's welfare before himself. And it was at the time, we couldn't see that because we were so underwater with everything. So we didn't know all the intricacies that were actually happening.
Right.
And Kevin got down to this, I guess, whatever it was, amount that he knew that like we had 1 or 2 shots in the cannon and it had to work. And he met with several friends, I think, and he met with all these influential people that were saying, do this, don't do that. And Kevin was essentially at the gambling casino of marketing saying, okay, how am I going to get this to work? And I know he was just racking himself to death with it. And he took a chance on it. And luckily, he did the right thing where leaders say, okay, look, I know the space, I know the battle space, and I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to risk it, and we're going to go for it.
Wow.
And he did it, and he said, I think at the time, Tim said, what's this kind of weird company called Mizzen and what?
Right.
Like, what is this stretchy shirt stuff?
Right.
But then he tried the shirt on, and he saw the story, he saw the message, and it was a proverbial home run.
Yeah.
And I remember when Kevin said, hey, look, we're going to sponsor the Tim Ferriss podcast tonight, and it's going to, or tomorrow or whatever. So be on the lookout on the website for the orders. If there's website jump or there's orders that come in, we want to make sure that we fulfill, and we're going to do a little something special for Tim's customers. We didn't expect to get blown out the way we did. It was amazing to watch the kind of traction, and people saw, the first thing that they saw was the story and how they were supporting veterans and how they were doing this and the difference in the product categories and stuff like that.
Right.
But little did anyone know the amount of down to the line,
Yeah.
like pressure.
Yeah.
That had to work.
Yeah.
And he took a chance and he just knocked it right out of the ballpark.
That
it was
is
amazing.
That is so cool.
And it was territory that was new at the time. So, years
Yeah.
back, because podcasts weren't then what they are today.
Not at all.
Thankfully for guys like, obviously the Joe Rogans of the world or Tony Robbins, or even, my kind of personal favorite's been Simon Sinek and,
I love Simon.
and great people like that have now like kind of taken that to the next level.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's been fun for like me, and because I consider myself kind of an early adopter of the podcast format as far as a consumer, and love to self-educate, love to consume content.
Those long road trips between congressional meetings.
Oh, as you know what that's all about. So there's plenty of windshield time. And so now, to get to do it, and that's kind of what it's like. It's like, well, these guys, you look at who starts a podcast, it's kind of that whole idea of like, if you want to create content, be passionate about something. And there is somebody to listen to, like Kevin Rose, which is, I learned about Kevin Rose, who wrote 1,000 True Fans, the founder of Wired, and that article that is now legendary. I learned that from Tim. And the thing is, it's really cool, Joe, to hear that story, because I was doing some advisory work for a startup in Atlanta known as Crown and Caliber. I will put a phenomenal company, as far as the pre-owned luxury watch business. Hamilton Powell, the founder, he really took that space to a new level. Great company. But in that deal where, my buddy Colin Barbado, he was the operations guy, and I told Colin, he brought me in to Crown and Caliber, and I said, man, right now, we need to be on Tim Ferriss's show. I said, it's not for Tim. Tim's very minimalist, and he's not going to be wearing a Hublot. But his listener base is our target audience, man. These are gearheads. These are people that are affluent. And right now, I said, I'm telling you, I looked at the price sheet for his ads back then, and it was relatively reasonable, but it was still, this was 4 years ago, maybe. So that was before he was really killing it. But again, the economies of scale hadn't really fit yet with podcasting, what you could get.
Right.
And they didn't do it. And I'm like, I always thought that was a huge miss. So I love this story, Joe. So I'm going to make sure that Jason Allen, the chief marketing officer, my buddy at Crown and Caliber, and Hamilton Powell, the founder, they listen, because now I think that I saw where to advertise on Tim's show is like $56K per episode. He does at least like 4 sponsors an episode, and you have to commit, I think, to 6 months. And if I said that wrong, it's something in that neighborhood.
Sure.
If you want to support the Texas Titans podcast, it's significantly less, I assure you. But no,
we'd be happy to have you.
We'd be happy to have your support. But anyway, well, thanks for that early story. That's awesome.
Sure.
That was a bonus feature that I didn't expect. But now let's get back to kind of your beginnings. I want to talk about the things that drew me to your story, man. I'm always drawn to veterans who are not just doing good things. You did a great thing by serving and helping other folks, but you're taking it to another level. It's like you made it your mission to go into civilian life in the private sector and use that as kind of a pull along to help other. And like I mentor veterans that are coming out of, like one of my closest friends from undergrad is he just retired from the Marines this year. And I'm trying to help him transition into the civilian life. He wants to be an entrepreneur. And so you've done that, man, so well. So let's talk about kind of what drew you to, first of all, service, and then the business acumen, and then kind of how your career went from there into the apparel business. And then let's just talk leadership, entrepreneurship, and philosophy on that. So just kind of take me back to the beginning, man.
Yeah, so I actually wound up in service, and when I was in high school, I did, the JROTC thing, but it wasn't my life. Like, and I did the whole drill team thing that went with it, and but I also like music was, a big thing, and I was in and out of a couple of high school bands, kind of garage bands kind of things, but at the same time, I had a real hard yearning for kind of that entrepreneurial spirit, and it was kind of burning inside. So I started mowing lawns and doing the basic stuff, suburban kid, just trying to figure it out, right? And of course, I failed all along the way, right? So it, made a couple bucks here and then lost all of it because the lawnmower broke and they couldn't afford to fix it, kind of thing. And then, went through college and went to the local community college. and was doing college and work, of course, because but I didn't have the A+ grades that could provide me a scholarship, so I was a working class schmuck that I had to schlep it along.
Yep.
But what I did learn, so I went to go work at Mercedes-Benz of Orlando. So my good friend Brock, his father was the general sales manager there, and I said, hey, I'm looking to do something I could work during the day so I can go to school at night and help provide my education, but also pay the bills and help my mom out at the time too, my single mom.
Yeah.
So I worked there full time during the day, and I got to understand, the ins and outs of car sales, and I got to spend time around the finance department, and just the whys and ins and outs of, or how tos about why certain things are the way they are, and I learned all about business from that. Was my hardcore introduction to it, and I was hooked. It was like I've never done heroin, but I would imagine that's what it's like.
Yeah.
I was just instantly mine. And he taught me so much. Mr. Berryhill is his name. I think he's retired, but he could still be there. Bob, if you hear me, I'll send this to you. Thank you for everything. But I started doing auto parts and performance parts for high-end cars because that was all our clientele, AMG and Porsche and stuff like that. So I started doing that on the side, wheels and tires, and I learned to get the sales knacker down, and I could do it. And I started really hustling. And I started to make a little bit of money, and I went to work with another company, a shop there in Orlando that was doing high-end work and tuning on cars. It was right when the whole Fast and Furious thing kind of started to come about, and everybody's they want to do wheels and tires in their car. They want to do high-performance work, and they want turbos and superchargers, all this kind of stuff. So I was doing a lot of the sales and marketing for it. So I figured, I got a good thing going on. I'm not going to let it go. It finally got to the point where, a young kid that, finds himself in a very successful position, relatively, to my means. I still drove a Honda Civic at the time, so I wasn't rolling around in a Ferrari.
Right.
I think I probably would have ruined it if I did. But
hey, but you're doing something you love, and you're having fun, which, as you know, the older you get,
that's
man,
right.
that's more how you gauge success.
Exactly. So essentially what happened was I got into a little scuffle with the local police department, some moving violations, kind of tacked up, and I was an irresponsible young man. So eventually I wound up before a very nice county judge who said, young man, I know that you're not stupid. And I remember this like it was yesterday. It was the most embarrassing point of my life. It was the lowest point I've ever been. And I remember he said, you need to do one of two things. You either need to find God and you need to straighten your life out and figure out what's going on, or you need to find a recruiter and let them do it for you.
Wow.
And I remember I got back in the car, and I didn't even have the courage to look at my mother when she came to pick me up. And I didn't say a word, and she literally drove, without my saying anything, straight down to the recruiter's office and put the car in park.
Really?
And it was like it was meant to be, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
And that's right, and that's what led me down the path. So if it wasn't for me finding, my proverbial rock bottom at the point there, that never would have given me the structure that I needed as a man, but also just as a citizen, like to be a productive person.
Yeah.
Right. So then joined the Marine Corps. It was everything. It was everything I needed and didn't know it.
Wow.
The Marine Corps would give me every single thing that I would need to be successful, both as a man and as a professional, as an entrepreneur,
Right.
that I would ever need.
Right.
And nothing of it was physical.
Wow.
It's all mindset.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what it allows you to develop these certain mindsets, or allows you to develop in a certain way that has so many different positive reinforcements in regular civilian life.
Right.
But a lot of times we're just so clouded we don't see it.
Well, and I have a lot of Marines that are friends, and of course, like we talked about before we got on the show, Jake Schick, who's been on here.
Hollywood,
just I
love that man.
Phenomenal human being.
He's such a good person.
Oh, he really is, and so to he and his beautiful wife Ashley, hey, what's up? Thank y'all so much for being a part of our lives. But every Marine that I talk to, that's the takeaway that I get is it is a mindset. Now, so kind of walk us through that. I mean, because a lot of it, from what I understand, is when you guys go in, it's a deconstruction, and then you come in basically a human and you leave a Marine.
That's right.
Right. So kind of walk us through some of those things and some of those pivotal moments for you where were you ever at that proverbial almost breaking point, only to realize, wait a minute, no, I can go from here forward, and then also just because I think this comes up in every business thing, what you were just talking about with the mizzen and main days. That's so applicable to business. There are always those times. I tell this to every would-be entrepreneur. You will have that time where you're going to think, I have absolutely no idea how we're going to keep the lights on next month, next week. And until you've experienced that, you have no clue how you're going to react. You just don't. So take us through some of those moments that came from the Marines, and then later, I hope it teases out that how that was able to be applied in what you've done.
Sure. So I hate to be like David Copperfield and say I was born and then I grew up and then I did this, but it really starts in the beginning. At least for me, it was basic training. Of course, you see all the movies and it's going to be hard, but you don't ever expect it to be as mentally challenging as it really is. And it's the toughest basic military training at least that I've seen or heard of in the United States military. Yeah. So, and it's that way for a reason. Look, there's two basic arms, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I like a good joke when I hear one, but there's two basic military components of the United States Armed Services. It's the Army and the Navy. Mm. The Air Force is a corporation, and the Marine Corps is a cult that works. Mm. And it really does. So when you go to boot camp, it's boot camp. It's not basic training. Even though you become a basically trained Marine, it's boot camp. It's supposed to be hard. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to wear out your boots, right? And you pay your dues. Yeah. And even then, it's just to earn the title. Mm-hmm. So when you graduate basic training, you are not anything other than a basically trained Marine, right? And that's it. And that's more than enough for what we go through. But roundabout, it's broken up in 3 phases. But roundabout the end of the second phase, you finish your rifle qualification and things like that, and you get ready for combat training. And that's where the real change kind of comes in. Some people it's earlier, and some people it's later. But round about that time, people start to lose, their own personal hope because they realize they're not going to get out of this, and they stop kind of clamoring for, thinking that they're going to make it and they're going to get out of this and they'll pull one on it. No, you're not the first and you're not going to be the last. Right. The quickest way, in and off that island is through training. Yeah. So, getting through all those things, you start to realize, okay, I'm going to buckle down. I'm going to forget about all this individual crap, and I'm going to start to realize that what we are doing is about us, not me. And it starts to really set in, and that's when you really start to. So I was a second squad leader, and you really start to see guys buckle down and work for each other, not just for themselves. So you'll start seeing, okay, well it's not okay. Well, you're sharing a canteen because your buddy needs a drink of water. No, you're passing off ammunition because he's low on something or something didn't work. So you're giving something that you need vitally, although it's in training and it's not. This isn't life or death here at this point. But it's those kind of things that you start to see happen, which really starts to draw dividends down the line for mental capability, for a strong mental mindset. Right. And even though it's just giving up one magazine or something, or giving up a Band-Aid, or giving up a tourniquet, or doing something like that, right? It's something that that you would need down the line if times got tough, but you gave it up anyway. Wow. Right? That's the kind of mindset that really starts to breed real entrepreneurship down the line, because you're not just doing something for yourself to make money. That's business. Right? I mean, everybody goes into business to make money, and that's great. But most people who are entrepreneurs, they don't just want to go make money. Absolutely. Well, no, I think it was Henry Ford who said something. In fact, we're going to paraphrase this, but it's someone who is only making profit for profit's sake will never find it. Or it's like he who thinks that they will find profit by seeking, or find happiness from profits and only works for profit's sake, will never find either, or something to that effect. And that is absolutely true. And as an entrepreneur, the chase of money, and I mean, this is kind of philosophical as far as life goes and everything. If it becomes about that kind of pie in the sky number that you're looking for, then you will find out really quick, it's not worth it. If that's just not enough to drive you through. So sure. I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah. That's where I really started to kind of put together the things that I learned just as a young entrepreneur in my teens and early 20s, because I went into the Marine Corps at 22 years old in the summertime. Wow. So if I was the second oldest guy in my platoon of 120, wow. And the next oldest guy was 28. So, I mean, we were grandpas. Wow. Like, when we graduated, they called us the grand old men of the platoon. Compared to 17, 18, 19 years old, the average age of most active duty enlistees in their first term is 19 years old. Yeah. Can't even barely buy a cigarette. Well, can't buy cigarettes now. Right. Can't even buy a beer. Yeah. But we started to learn these things and put the pieces together, and you start to realize there's so many commonalities between that strong mental mindset and entrepreneurship. Right. And I started to see that because I had already had an inkling of entrepreneurship, some failures early on, but you started to say, man, if I'd have known this about myself or felt this way about myself, I could have done so much better here. And I held on to that.
Yeah.
I said, okay, well, I got to get through my enlistment, and then I might re-enlist. Maybe I really love the Marine Corps, and I'll just want to stay.
Yeah.
So I kind of put it on a mental back burner.
Okay.
And then my time came around. I actually tried re-enlisting into the Marine Corps 4 times, and it was during the Great Drawdown in 2009 and into 2010. We were in Iraq, and we had some opportunities, and for whatever reason, the universe just said, it's not for you.
Yeah.
And it finally came down to where, they said, okay, well, we can let you be a pay administrative clerk or something like that, and you can stay here in Texas. And I said, I'll take my DD-214. I'm walking. See you later.
Yeah.
Nobody joins the Marine Corps to go to pay section.
Right.
Although there are some very lovely accountants in pay section, and I love you all. Please don't get angry. We couldn't do it without you.
Right.
But it's not what generally what excites people at the outset when they want to do something like that, right? Everybody sees the Hollywood movies or Arlie Ermy and Full Metal Jacket and all that kind of stuff. But when you start to you get rid of all the physical attributes about the Marine Corps, right, and you forget about all the things. So I worked on fighter jets, so it's not really applicable to daily life necessarily, right? I was a glorified electrician. Yeah. When you get out, what they do is, I'll back up here and I'll kind of define it as to why there's so many issues, but there's so many solutions here, right? The biggest issue is they train you up, in spending hundreds of thousands, or some of these guys millions of dollars in training and schooling.
Yeah.
Literally millions of taxpayer dollars spent on these individuals,
right,
or a small team in operations, to get them to a specific training point, so where they're whatever level of that they need to be. No different than somebody going on scholarship for a large university, either in athletics or in if they're going to be a professor and stay there at the university, adjunct or whatever, right, to stay within the pipeline. So the cost of their employment eventually just goes up and up and up and up and up to where they must stay as a term of essentially employment, right? You got to pay your dues with getting all the things in return. Same thing in the military, whether you're a pilot or your intelligence or your contracting or whatever, it's all the same. But they spend all this money, and then it takes years to get to that specific specialty point, right? And they could stay for 20 or 30 or even, like General Mattis, 40 years, right? But most don't. Most are out in 4 to 8. Having gone through these schools, it took me almost a year. It was like 11 and a half months of training just to get to my basic specialty, to go to my first duty station here in Fort Worth.
Wow.
And even as an active duty Marine, but that's a long time.
Yeah.
So the taxpayer really isn't getting a whole lot of good investment there, right? Your ROI isn't all that great at that point.
Right.
And then going out in 4 years, so they spend all this money, which the equivalent's about $70,000 ish, as best I've done my Google homework to kind of look at the equivalency, to go through these programs. Electrician school, aviation maintenance school, specialty weapons school, and then basic training and combat training on top of it.
Right.
So you call it $75,000 to $100,000 on average, depending on time, right? If you're backed up or whatever. But those things being realistic, they give you 3.5 days or a week in some cases to learn how to be a civilian again, and then they say, "Hasta lasagna, don't get any on you."
Right.
And it's hard, and you wonder why people have such a hard time coming out, because they go from having that team-based mentality for years and years and years, and multiple combat deployments, or even some of them 8, 9 deployments, over a period of 3 or 4 enlistments, or some less. And then you wonder why we have a hard time kind of trying to figure things out when we get home. It's because, you don't just shut the lights off. Right. You can't just, take the Ghostbusters route and shut the whole system down. Right. Because and maybe this is a closer analogy than I want it to be, but then all the ghosts come out. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we have a hard time adjusting to reality because we live in a world that isn't realistic.
Yeah. Oh, man. I could not agree more. Like, you're going to think I'm crazy. So just by making that comment, I'm going to presume that you're a fan of The Matrix.
Loved it.
Okay. Because, one of my close friends, a guy named Daniel Turner, and DT, I hope you're listening, he's a pastor, and he's constantly basically talked about The Matrix, and the plasticity of this world, And I just watched The Matrix for the first time in its complete, the full movie probably a month ago. Always knew what it was about, and I always hear it reference, because guys like you and I that kind of, we get that, we just have that mindset. I knew the movie before I saw it, and then to see it, but you're right. That is, it's just the way. But I want to digress for a minute. But that makes so much sense, because coming from something where there is so much meaning and there's so much defined tradition and the teamwork that you lived in the Marines, that's what I'm and my buddy Joey, who listens to the podcast every week. So Buster, this is to you, and I do still call him Joey. He's going to laugh at that because he's now, he's a retired Marine, Joe Burke, not Joey Burke or Buster, but he's still Joey or Buster to me. But I mean, he's making that transition. He and by the way, you'll appreciate this. He's had his first round in politics.
Okay.
So you can imagine a retiring Marine going straight into his first campaign, trying to get a very good candidate elected to Congress.
Sure.
And dealing with a campaign. So he would call me, and I could just hear the frustration. And when you've been around as long as you and I, it's like, I don't want my cynicism to wear off on him.
Right.
I'm like, brother, this isn't like the Marines. Forget all the direct communication you once knew. Forget about it.
Throw it all out the window.
No,
man.
it's gone. It's politics now, man. And so anyway, but
So there's not to interrupt you,
No,
but
go
there's
ahead.
there's a couple of really keen lines that always my brother took me to go see it when it first came out in 1999. It was like April 99, something like that, or maybe May. I can't remember. But anyway, I was going into high school, and he picked me up from school early one day, and he's like, "Come on, we're going to go see this." So we went down to. I was living in Orlando. He took me down to the Disney IMAX theater, and they had the big screen and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And I didn't know what I was walking into. I had no clue. We're going to go see The Matrix. I'm like, okay, cool. Keanu Reeves, great. Point Break, awesome.
yeah,
You know?
right. Johnny Utah, baby.
Exactly. Get me two. But we go in and watch it, and the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, this is really cool, and the special effects, and it's amazing. But then you get older, you experience things, you go through it again, you watch it again, and then you wait a few years, and then you watch it again, and each time you watch it, you're picking up something new, but it's not something that was intended to come out in the theater when they released it.
Yeah.
Right? Because reality really it hadn't changed for you yet, because you only had known one world.
Yeah.
Right? In a way.
Absolutely.
So, at least in a metaphorical way, right?
Right.
And then you get older and you get out of the military, and then you watch it again. And then you almost anybody who's ever had a man or woman, doesn't matter, you most earnestly identify with Neo in kind of, 3 points. Right? The beginning is when you're at the table and Agent Smith is across from you, and he says, you pay your taxes and you help your landlady with her garbage.
Right.
And he says, basically, how about I give you the finger and I get my phone call? Right? It's that kind of rebellious kind
Absolutely.
of, right? You just get out. And then a little bit later, you kind of start to, realize, and you see things for what they are. And then you have other people around you that kind of give you these hints and understandings of things. And maybe you meet your oracle, right? That's somebody who guides you through, and it's kind of that light on moment.
Yeah.
And you pick up things, and you learn things like when Cypher says that some people become so comfortable in their own personal realities that they'll often fight to keep it, even though it's not real.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then finally, as you really start to understand your reality and your world, when you kind of say, okay, I'm going to let go of who I was physically. I'm going to let go of these things that are holding me back from succeeding in life, or succeeding as a family man, as a father, as a husband, as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize that, at the end, it's kind of twofold. You realize there is no spoon. And then, kind of at the very end of the film, the bullets really do stop firing, because it's not because, they're not real, but it's because you just don't want them to fire anymore.
Yeah.
And you don't have to let it.
You don't have to let them.
That's right.
That's the
it's
thing.
the greatest probably my second or third most favorite movie of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Hands down.
And it needs to be, required reading for every entrepreneur program. And the thing is, or anyone,
I think that'd be great.
it would, right. Or anyone that's just wanting to, I don't know that. So I write this blog called Break Your Own Rules, or Make Your Own Rules rather. And I agree with both. It's really that mindset. And it's not, and when people hear that, they think, oh, well, this is some kind of contrarian, be a rebel type mantra. No, that is not it at all. For instance, it's the very first installment, the very first blog I wrote of the Make Your Own Rules. I talked about how I'd come over to Dallas, and literally I'm in the parking lot half an hour early. I text the executive assistant who's arranging this meeting with me and this very, very successful real estate developer that's multi-millionaire. And I'm very excited. I've driven all the way from Tyler to meet him in his office. And I text her from the parking lot, just want to let you know, I'm a little early, but whatever. She said, oh, sorry. I won't call his name on here, but he had something come up. He won't be able to meet. And so I was immediately furious, but I remembered Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning saying his famous quote, "The distance between action and reaction is space. And the key is how you use that space. And by the way, that space is where those bullets fly." Right? And so you have the choice to either, are you going to let the bullets fly, or are you just going to, no, I'm not. And that's what I did in that day. And so that's whenever I started writing the Make Your Own Rules blog. I have a choice. I can be angry, pissed off at this situation and let it ruin my day, or I can refocus on, it was a beautiful day. Now my calendar had opened up. I could do a lot more work, whatever. And it's the same way with anything, with who offends you, who doesn't. I get to make that choice. Is that going to be a bullet or no? I get to choose. And so anyway, well, I think it should be required viewing for every would-be entrepreneur.
I would completely agree. It kind of reminds me, so in the Marine Corps, they have required reading, the Commandant's reading list. Mm-hmm. And in order for you to advance, I think now it's kind of more graded. You do a book report or fill out a test or something like that in order to kind of go to the next rank. So you have to read the books that are required reading of you.
Right.
One of them is L. Ron Hubbard's Ender's Game, mm-hmm.
which
is a magnificent sci-fi novel.
Right.
And then the other one is Starship Troopers, which a lot of people love. The 90s movie. It was great. It's a great Hollywood movie. But the book itself is one, it's much more dark. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is it's also a lot more enlightening to kind of the human spirit and the human kind of either the passion and success or the tragedy and depravity of human ingenuity.
Right.
Kind of the way the human mind works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really enlightening to kind of see that, even though it's a science fiction novel, but you really start to draw the lines to reality.
Right.
Kind of how people operate.
Right.
And more importantly, why people operate the way they do,
Yeah.
specifically under pressure or when they feel scared.
Yeah.
Along with all the other, required reading that's like The Art of War or Gates of Fire or The Guns of August and things like that.
Yeah. Which Gates of Fire, by the way, that is one I have not read. And so any fan, that's one that just came on my radar probably within the last month. Now, that's the one about the Spartan warriors,
Battle
right?
of Thermopylae.
There you go.
Yep.
So, and which, and anyone listening, if you like, since you've read it, and I have not, but this is why I'm going to read it, the kind of the commentary goes, if you like the movie 300, but you really want to understand the true story and what happened and everything, Gates of Fire is what you should check out.
It's a lot more extravagant and insane in its story form than the movie would ever be.
Yeah.
And the movie was great.
Yeah.
It's excellent Hollywood filming.
Yeah.
Amazing graphics and awesome story, right? It's a David and Goliath story. It's classic literacy.
Exactly.
Or classic literary kind of tales, right? The way humans have been telling tales since we sat around a fire or sat around a stream and started communicating with each other. Right. But Gates of Fire is told from a very interesting perspective. And without spoiling it for you, it's told from the perspective essentially of a prisoner who's standing before King Darius or Darius, however you want to pronounce it, and explaining the story because he understands and respects warriors to an extent that he also understands his own.
Wow.
So it's classical, Greek literary architecture, but also modern day, lots of modern day equivalencies. It's a lot of fun, and if you both an audiobook and paperback is just as good.
Well, okay, well then there you go. So that'll be the next on my reading list. I've actually started with, I guess it was the episode before the one that I launched this week was my very first book review, which was James Altucher's Choose Yourself. Great book for somebody that's an entrepreneur that wants to use the new economy to break out. So just a plug for that. So maybe that Gates of Fire, that's definitely going to make the book review list.
No doubt.
So okay, now. So you've filled your toolkit with some Marine training, incredible investment by the taxpayer into you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
great small paycheck.
So where do you take that and now let's launch the business career.
So I get out, I go back to school. Went a couple of different times, as a matter of fact, because I just couldn't make my mind up, and I was distracting myself with all kinds of things. And
were you the first member of your family to go to college?
No.
Okay, so
No,
I was. And it sounded like our backgrounds sounded so similar that I was like, maybe that's...
Yeah, there are quite a few college grads, a couple of academy grads in there,
Okay.
and
Okay.
you know, some military, some hardcore guys in there.
Okay.
I was my grandfather and my great grandfather were both Marines, so you know that when I chose the Marine Corps, it was kind of I wanted to be the...
Which is a common thread I've found.
It very much so, especially when you have direct lineage still alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not uncommon to see third and fourth generation, direct descendants all going, because it's such a powerful organization, such a powerful mindset,
right?
And they see the results that come from it. But anyhow, get out and go back to college a couple of times, and community college here locally in North Texas, and I couldn't find a stride, I couldn't, or more importantly, I wouldn't allow myself to find a stride, which is really, you get in your own way more than anything else, right? Our demon's always in the mirror. Right. It's never actually in front of you.
Yeah. I like that.
So, quote me on that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing of it is what I was missing was that mission-oriented mindset, right? Of having a goal and then doing everything I can within my power to move mountains to get into that goal, to accomplish that mission.
Yeah.
And I found that actually I had just gone to the dean's office and disenrolled in college, and I had decent grades, B's and C's. It wasn't great, but it wasn't awesome either. And he had actually been a retired Army Command Sergeant Major, the highest enlisted rank in the Army. And he said, "Are you sure you're making the right decision?" And I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." Right. And I was just kind of hands in the air at that point, and I was done. Yeah. All I knew is I didn't want to be there anymore. And there were some incidents that just kind of helped me get there. But case in point, I got into my car and I turned the radio on, and I was like, you know what? I'm tired of hearing music that I just hear every day. And I put on AM radio. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to see if there's just something on that's different. Right. And I get halfway out of the parking lot, and I hear a campaign commercial. It was 8:20 AM here in DFW, which is typically the conservative talk radio station, but it was something, and it was clear, and I was like, all right, whatever. It was a political ad paid for by Grant Stinchfield for Congress, who at the time was running against the now retired Kenny Marchant in a Republican primary. Which, if people outside of the state of Texas look, this is a Republican bubble. It's just it's just like California, but the other color. Right. And it's a very deep red state, and it's one of those things that people get so wrapped up in the conservatism kind of thing in politics, where it's you have conservatives and true conservatives, and nobody's ever true conservative enough for some people. Right. And that's fine. It's the same any other way you look at it, right? And that's fine. But at this point, it's nitpicking on its best day. Yeah. But what had concerned me was just some very real things that were going on in politics, and I didn't feel was right, and that was that the congressmen and women themselves were seemingly taking advantage of the markets in 2008 and 2009 for their own personal enrichment, and the paperwork proved it. And I was like, this is insane. I can't believe I served my country for this. I don't want this whole mental self-righteous rant. Right. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna call this guy. So I looked up as best I could at pulling the internet up on my phone at that time, and it still took like 5 minutes to get the website up. Yeah. And I just called the number, and I said, can I come down and learn more about what's going on? And they invited me out to, they were having a little town hall meeting, of which I think like 2 people showed up at a Spring Creek barbecue. And I met Grant, and which we're still friends today, although we're off doing our own thing, but we still keep in touch. He's a great man, amazing entrepreneur. He's got so many different things going on. But anyhow, I learned that he was a former investigative reporter, and he did all these other things. And I learned about the things about the whys, and I was like, this is me. Yeah, it's like this is exactly what I felt that I needed at the time. And I think at the time even Grant felt that. And his father was also a Marine, or his grandfather, rather. I'm sorry. His grandfather was a Marine and served with the 7th Marines in the Pacific at Guadalcanal and a couple of other places. Okay. Served with a very famous Marine, was his commander. His name was Chesty Puller, who is kind of our Superman as Marines go. Oh,
wow. God, that's saying a lot, man.
Wow. I mean, if you do your own Google homework on him, you'll see why. Okay. He's just an amazing individual that he passed away in the 60s, but we had a very quick connection, Grant and I was like, you know what, I'm going to work my ass off for this guy and for this mission. And I did, and I didn't take a paycheck. I volunteered my time. And I know, my now ex, my wife at the time was like, I can't believe you're doing this, but you're so powerfully mindset into it, I have to let you do it.
Wow.
So I got away with it for a period of time, and I was on unemployment for a short amount of time, and then, that runs out. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to stick with it. And I got some odds and ends jobs that just kind of pay the bills, but I finished the campaign out, and that was the campaign season of the never-ending primary.
Yeah.
I think 11 months it went on. It was supposed to be 8, or supposed to be 7, but it went on for 11 because of redistricting. And
Yes. Yeah.
so I know that there was a certain senator who was also involved in that race, who I met several times before.
Which it turned out, man, that was great. We used that extra runway. To our
Sure,
advantage,
absolutely.
Man. We needed all the help and time.
Oh my God, that was
it.
unbelievable. But we could fill up multiple podcasts with that. But the thing is I found that I could capably convince myself to apply myself to a degree to where I could get that mindset on a daily basis. And it took a while. Those first 5 or 6 months, and my wife at the time got pregnant, and it was a very stressful time at the same time, but it was also a very blissful time when we started to realize just how important where we were at that point in our lives, and how I needed to be, not just as to be an upcoming father or a decent husband at the time, but now I needed to realize how to get that mindset to work for me on a daily basis, so that I could build something on it. Right. I could start to rebuild my own personal foundation.
Right.
So I made my own reality. So it wasn't like, well, I'm going to create this world around me. It's just kind of like, no, well, I'm going to create my own comfort zone within the world so that I can do what I want.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to get there, but I finally started to see the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
So that's where I went next.
Wow. And which goes back to, and I think that the more that we talk, I see the similarities in mindset, because man, that's exactly how I ended up buying my first company. It was the same thing. It was just like just misery, kind of being going back to, being in the matrix to like, wait a minute, I don't have to do this if I don't want to. I can create my reality. Now you got to stay within the guidelines of the law. And I'm a big not color outside the lines kind of guy.
Yeah, see, I'm the opposite.
See, I am like man, I don't color outside the lines, but I also, when it comes to the proverbial career or whatever, man, I'm like, now more than ever. Now this was, 17 years ago when I decided, why not go back to East Texas where I want to raise my daughters? And why not buy a real estate company, even though I've never sold a house in my life? And why not go to Tyler, because Sulphur Springs, there's really nothing for me to do there. So I'll go to Tyler because it's a little bigger and I like it. Why not? Why wouldn't I do that? And another thing too, man, like whenever, for me, is I used to hear, and this is what I love about your story, because you've had a lot of revelations at a pretty young age, right? And
sure.
And like I used to hear these guys I'd work with whenever I was working for Fortune 500 companies, is that kind of their goal was to make it to retirement where they'd had enough in their 401k or whatever to then go out and buy or start a small business. And I used to hear that over and over and over. These guys that were very bright, making, just killing it, financially. I'd be like, why would you wait? I don't want to wait that long. I don't want to. I see the game that's being played here in corporate America, and if I just keep my nose down and keep doing this right, I'll make a lot of money. I'll get the country club membership, and we'll both drive Lexuses, and we'll take a ski trip every year. We'll fall in line. But why not go out and just do that now? Because you guys are doing that, and you're saying that's what you want. So you start to do that, and then where does that take you? How does that react? Now that you're seeing you have the control to truly start to shape your reality and your day-to-day, then where does it take you?
So we get through the campaign season, and then, of course, we failed to defeat the incumbent.
Right.
But by the large...
Which, by the way, Joe, that I talked about earlier, went through... God, y'all stories are so similar. Did the exact same thing. He got on a campaign with a guy, met him kind of the same way. Wasn't a longtime friend that called him up and said, hey, will you help me? I'm running for Congress. No, he met this guy at a restaurant in Houston, and he was trying to take out a very powerful, I won't say it on here, but just 'cause I don't want to get involved in all that. Sure. I don't want emails coming at me about that sort of thing. But he's like, he was going to take out an incumbent. And so Joe, out of just pure conviction, jumped on board, ends up managing his campaign. So literally, not only is this his first campaign ever, but he's basically managing it. And just like you did, trying to take out an incumbent. It didn't work this time, but Anyway, so it's interesting, the parallels, So
Absolutely.
therefore, all you Politico wannabes, you office seekers, go find a like-minded Marine, and you'll be in good company.
I hate to say it, but the best thing you can do getting into politics is you learn how to lose. And it's
Amen.
even when President George H.W. Bush, who I had the pleasure of meeting several times, who was probably one of the greatest modern statesmen our country would ever have. But even he had to lose, I think, 3 times before he ever really. And same thing with President Lincoln; it was the same way.
Yep.
But we don't win our way to success.
That's right.
You fail your way to success.
Absolutely.
So you got to know, that the fire's hot. You got to skin your knees, and you got to eat your own dog food, and you got to tell your own story, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, nobody comes along. But the thing was, and then I got, eventually, the work I had done in the campaigning with a couple of different people had taken notice, and I would, being the sole veteran on the campaign and being able to talk to and relate to other vets. So we have our own language, right? And once you meet somebody and you start using abbreviations, and most civilians will just kind of roll their eyes and they know that, okay, it's Greek from that point on.
Yep.
But the thing was, we in the area, and so I got approached by, let me back up, I got approached by a congressional office by a new congressman. And he said, hey, I have Fort Hood in the district, and I've seen your work with other campaigns, and I know how you can work with vets, and we've got a lot of things that need to be done on the constituent services side, specifically with the VA and things like that, and transition assistance. And is that something you'd be willing to work with? And I said, absolutely, hands down. And it's a good thing he said that and didn't tell me about the paycheck, because when you work for congressional staff, trust me, you're not doing it for the money.
Don't do it for the money.
That's right. But it was probably some of the most fulfilling work I've ever done. I was down at Fort Hood 2 or 3 days a week, made some great relationships, met some amazing people. Had a really interesting time getting to meet General Milley, who's now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Yeah.
When he was a 3-star general, the commander of 3 Corps at Fort Hood.
Yeah.
Was one of the interesting story about him. His father was an Iwo Jima Marine.
I did not
So
know
when
that.
I walked into his office, and General Milley, if you ever hear this, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Please don't forget me. But I walked into his office, and in his office, now he had his command flag, which is his stars, the red flag with the white stars, and then you have the U.S. flag on the other side of the room that's there. But on the wall was a tattered old Marine flag, and it was an old flag because it had the old logo on it, and it was all just scratched and burnt up, and it was tattered,
Right.
kind of like that old Johnny Cash song.
Uh-huh.
But I asked him about it. It was the first thing I asked him. I said, General, what's with the Marine Corps flag on the wall? And he goes, the first thing he said, well, you noticed that, huh? Why do you ask? And I said, well, I rolled up my sleeve at the time, and I showed him my tattoo on my arm, and he goes, well, my daddy was a Marine.
Okay.
And he hit the beach, I think it was with the 5th Marines in the initial invasion when they hit the beach. And it was like, he's like, that always reminded me of service, not just service to my country, but service to my brothers and to my sisters and to the rest of the people in this country that we owe a debt of gratitude and a debt of service to, which, can go on and on. But
Sure.
It was one of the things that I noticed in getting to work in that job was so fulfilling, and getting to see all the other servants in different parts of their lives, and making these kind of interesting connections and friendships and all over the board.
Yeah.
And then I finally, I started to get to the point where I started to see the politics of things, and not just the campaign politics, but the day-to-day politics of the job.
Yeah.
Look, it's a thankless job. People who work in staffing positions in the Congress, I love you all. I don't care who you work for or what your party politics is. I don't care. You guys have a thankless job, and you deserve all the respect and a pay raise that you can get, because it's a never-ending gig.
Yeah.
If people retire and somebody has to show up right behind you to continue the work, it's never ending, right?
Yeah.
But I got to see some things in the inside baseball, the way things are. And even the congressman said, he's like, look, you got bigger aspirations. You want to do bigger and better things. How can I help you?
Yeah.
And he being a small businessman, he understands these things. He's an entrepreneur himself, very successful one.
Yeah.
He said, if ever I can do anything for you, you let me know, and I'll be here for you 100%. And it was that kind of, and his chief of staff, who's a dear friend of mine, backed it up. And he's like, look, if you need to do other things, you got to do other things. What can we do to help?
Right.
And it was that kind of positive reinforcement. And at the same time, and getting to know Kevin at Mizzen at the time, which was just barely a website.
Yeah.
And 2 shirts and like in a early, pattern that, today would never fly.
Right.
But at the time, like, it was life-changing, not just for me, but to people that were, kind of in and around it. And that's when I kind of made that transition. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm getting out of the system. and I'm going to turn my back on the crowd, and I'm just going to walk the other way and hope to God it works.
Wow.
And okay, I put my head down and I said, okay, I'm leaving. And he's like, Kevin told me at first, and if he hears this, he might either laugh or he might get really mad. I don't know. Either way, I mean it in the best intentions, Kev. But he's like, I can't have you come work with me. It's just like menial office work. Like, I can't pay you really much of anything. And I said, I don't care.
Wow.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it was kind of, I had my own personal, I don't know, maybe my own personal Carol Shelby moment where Lee Iacocca told the Ford board, said, get this man $25,000 before he bites somebody.
Right.
But I made my mind up and I said I was going to do it. And Kevin was like, okay. All right, here we go. And I had one person who I was working next to, Kristen, who was amazing. And that company just literally just started to take off from the moment we all put our heads together, and Kev led that thing into success like you wouldn't believe. And everybody told us all along the way. And this is probably looking back, it's my biggest driver in the beginning, because so many people from all walks of life said, this is never going to work.
Yeah.
You're not going to make it. Nobody's going to buy a poly shirt. Nobody's going to do this. And we don't, foreign manufacturing's better now. And all of these, and they're very valid points in their own right. And that's fine. But the last thing in the world that you want to do, and this is me being a little cocky, is you're not going to go tell a Marine he's not going to do something. Right. That's just kind of like saying, I double dog dare you. Right. You've already lost. It's over. Right. We're just going to spend the rest of our lives proving you wrong. Not just because we want to do it, because it makes us happy. Right. And it took off into oblivion at that point. It just kept going up and up and up and up and up. To a point where we started to see some local success, and the news outlets are picking it up, and people are talking about it, and social media took off, and athletes wanted to be a part, and Kevin and his CFO and his team raised $1 million to fund the business, which was one of the most amazing things I've ever been a part of. To watch that process go down from doing your friends and family helping you out, and stuffing your own cash into the business and eating your proverbial own dog food, right? And to where now investors want to be part of it, and people on a national and international scale are taking, and it was all made in the U.S. and it was supporting veterans, and people were taking notice, and Kev's wife came on board as a CMO, and things just took off. And even looking back on it today, you couldn't generate that kind of success even if you took $10 million, even $20 million, and tried to replicate it. Because everything was inherently organic. Right? It was led by a guy who basically said, I have to make the best of every nickel I've got, and I really just got to have it. Has to work. I have to have this work. And we all had the same attitude. We were all working 12 and 15-hour days. We were all grinding it out. We were all doing different. Kevin was doing customer service emails. And Jen was doing it, and Kristen was doing it, and I was doing it. I was picking and packing, and he was doing social media, and it was never ending. Right. So when we got up every morning, you had 300 emails in your inbox, and half of them were just auto-generated stuff, and the other half is orders, and the other half is sizing customers, and all this kind of stuff that I had no idea how to deal with at the time. Admittedly, please don't hate me. But we had to just figure out solutions on the fly, which is where I really started to rely on that mission-oriented mindset. Because at least in the Marine Corps, and we're always kind of the redheaded stepchild of the military, and we get lots of hand-me-downs, and we don't have the nicest tools for things.
That's something I hear also.
Because it's true. But you know what? There's a funny line in that HBO series, Generation Kill, that came out in 2007, 2008. And shout out to my friend Rudy Reyes, by the way, who was in it and portrayed himself. But there was a line in it from the guy who plays Iceman, and he says, the Army, they get all the cool stuff, and the Air Force gets the fancy toys, but we're Marines, and Marines make do. And that's our mentality. We don't need to have the fastest, fanciest, best of everything. We have our mission, and we're going to get the job done come hell or high water. And I kind of had to go back to that mindset to tell myself, okay, you don't have all the tools in the bucket. You don't have all the answers. You're not going to be able to satisfy everybody. You need to do what you can, when you can, with what you got, and you need to make the best of it. And if it happens to be a situation that's just a pile of the proverbial then you need to put 2 pieces of bread on either side and just take a bite and get it over with.
Man, That is the most profound advice I could give any entrepreneur. And everyone, Joe, that I talked to on this podcast that has had success. Now, I love this conversation because now I'm visiting Maine. I mean, it's a thing, right? I mean, it's blown up. So, but people don't understand that there was a time whenever it was just a small group, a band of misfits trying to make it,
Very
work
much so.
with spit and baling wire.
Very much, yeah.
And a lot of people, and those of you who listen to the podcast regularly, you know that I've said this over and over because I've met a lot of these people. A lot of people think they want to be an entrepreneur, but until you've done it, and it's okay. It is quite all right if you are a corporate staff person by nature. But because let me tell you something, it's not for everybody because you're going to find yourself in that position where you're doing things that you hate to do, that your ego says you're way too important to do. But you have to just go, no, we're part of something bigger. But if you really grasp the good stuff about entrepreneurship, which is you're getting to build something. It's kind of different. Okay, going back to our political world, Kevin Eltife, who was an incredibly successful state senator. But before that, Kevin was a city councilman, the mayor of Tyler, then state senator, and now the chairman of the University of Texas Board of Regents. And when he was in the Senate, I remember he told me this a number of times. He said, I miss being on city council. He said, when I was on council, all I had to do is convince, 6 other people to go my way, and we could make some change, we could get some things done. Try going to the state Senate, and then you go to the world that we were in for a while, the Congress and the Senate trying to get things done there. It's crazy. Well, in entrepreneurship, that's the thing. The things you do, you may do some really grunt work, but you can move the needle. And I'll also say another thing, because we were talking about business school before we came on today. If there's anything I can tell the listener about entrepreneurship and what it teaches you and the difference between it and the corporate world, is that in entrepreneurship, they will tell you, investors, when they're looking at your idea, your business plan, they will take a B idea, but that has an A team behind it all day long. You
100%.
can, because you can have, if you have the most stellar idea ever, but you've got a crap team, it won't matter. It will not matter. It sounds like you guys
100%.
had an A team together.
Right, 100%. And I completely agree on all fronts. And somebody who made that a kind of a reality to me, I met him a few times in politics, and then I met him, luckily, I kind of stayed quasi-acquaintances with him. And his family is Chris Kleiner over at Hunt Oil, or Hunt Consolidated on the investment arm.
Okay.
And I had been lucky enough to sit at a couple of dinners, and he was there, and listening to him talk and speak. And look, the most for especially a young vet or somebody that's a young person who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur, right? The best thing that you can do is not go run out into the other pack of dogs and try and make it work. The best thing that you can do is keep your mouth shut, sit by the sidelines for a minute, and listen. And that's exactly what I did. And I learned that through politics, but moreover, I learned why once I started to get into the small business world, and then branding and other things that kind of come with it. But the thing was, and listening to him say that very same thing when he was speaking about vets in the workplace. Now Hunt, and for people who don't know, Hunt Oil is the largest privately owned oil company in the world. And they're based right here in Dallas, Texas. And looking at his point of view, and he deals with the most powerful people on the planet, right? Bar none. Mm-hmm. And from Arab sheikhs to princes and royalty and the United Nations all the way down, right to the mayor of Dallas, right? And everywhere in between. But to hear him say that very same thing, to say, look, if I can find a couple of really headstrong guys and girls to get onto a project that I'm just not having much luck with, I don't have a whole lot of faith in right now. It might be like kind of a CD project for me, but I can take pieces of my A team that they've got 2 hours a week each to focus on something. I know that they're going to make that a roaring success.
Right.
And it's exactly what a lot of these top line CEOs or these big C-suite, personalities, for lack of a better cliche term, really look for, or even big private equity funds like your Blackstones or BlackRocks or anybody else, right? The Ray Dalios of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Right. it doesn't come down to whether or not somebody's got multiple degrees or speaks 900 languages or all these other things. It's kind of like a record of success or a record of failure, but proven results.
Yeah.
Right. So they know, okay, well, if somebody's failed along the way a little bit, they know how to get around things.
Yep.
Right. Or they see that the experience pays off in certain dividends in certain areas where they really need that investment to come through, not just because they need to make an X percentage point on the return.
Right.
Right. It might be for a completely different play. But that's kind of getting off into the weeds. But the thing is, taking a couple of well-rounded, headstrong individuals, putting them together in a team, and say, look, we've got this idea. We're not sure it can work. What do you think?
Yeah.
And with nothing more than that, they put it on the table, and then they let the dogs go to work.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what they're supposed to do.
Right.
But out of that, they start to meld and mold and put things together in ways that even the senior leadership doesn't expect. But that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys, they have a real affinity for the way that, and this is not in a direct sense or even because it works, for disconnected decision making. And what that essentially means, and what we practice in the Marine Corps, is leadership from the bottom up, not just from the top down.
Yeah.
Anybody can stand on top of the mountain and bark orders,
Yeah.
right? But it takes the guy on the bottom to say, come on, guys, let's go do this,
Right.
to rally the troops to get everybody going. So you lead from the front, you don't lead from the back.
Yeah.
And a lot of those guys know that. So disconnected decision making is, in a nutshell, to where if your business owner or let's say your president of a company needs to have something done at the very bottom level, he's not going to tell, okay, you're going to go have a levels of bureaucracy. He's going to, Pete's going to call Phil, Phil's going to call Sally, Sally's going to call Phyllis, and then all the way down. Well, it doesn't work like that. Pete goes right to the bottom and says, Bill, I need to get this done. I need to trust that you can do this. Can you do it? Yes, sir, I can do it. Okay, get it done.
Right.
Let me know when you're finished.
Right.
That's it.
Yep.
And then you trust that Bill's going to go get it done.
Yep.
So corporate America, while it for many of its failures, its biggest positive is in the understanding of disconnected decision making is such a pro for these big companies, because they understand that the levels of bureaucracy in the middle really just slow everything down.
Yeah.
And if you're a publicly traded company, it's the worst thing that you can do.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it slows your pace to market. Right?
Right.
It slows your results. It slows your shareholder information. It becomes a vicious circle.
Right.
So they look at things like that, and he even told me himself. He's like, "Yeah, absolutely. I would take 3 people that I know and that I trust to work on something, and put them on a failing idea, and I'll go watch it succeed. It's
Right.
not because it's because I'm cocky. It's because I know that I trust my people.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Makes all the difference in the world.
all the difference in the world.
So, okay, well now you leave me as in the main, and I want to get to Trinidad 3 because that's
Sure.
this kind of has it all, man. It seems to me like where you have landed now, the leadership role that you've assumed, and I'm happy to be at this stage because I know that it is a recent occurrence.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of taking it all, as it would, from my perspective, it's taking all of that incredible experience, and it's kind of coming to, now it's kind of really kind of coming into full development. So take us to, I want to know about the company.
Sure.
I plan to be able to buy a pair of jeans pretty soon.
Absolutely,
I want to get some Trinidad 3 jeans, but talk about the company, your role, and what it means to you and what that company is doing, because very similar heritage with regard to wanting to create a marketplace, mechanism to support our heroes, right?
That's right.
So
To serve those who serve us. So, after Mizon, there was a couple of stops. Had a brief stint in a portfolio company at a private equity firm. And then I was back in the apparel business and out on the outerwear side, 2.5 years at a great brand called Save the Duck. And then just recently have migrated over to a position where I said, you know what, this was meant to be. So there's a funny way that it happened. So I was introduced to the founder of Trinidad 3 Jeans. His name is actually Trinidad, so his name's on the label, but it's Trinidad Garcia III. So shout out to my boy Trin out there in Oxnard, California. SoCal for life, man. But I was introduced to him last year through a mutual friend, and at first, he said, look, he's a denim designer. I looked him up, and it really wasn't necessarily my cup of tea out the gate. I was like, you know what, dude, you're another Marine. I've never met another Marine in our industry other than one who doesn't work on the brand side. He works on the retail side. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what, I'm going to sit down with you, and so long as we're sitting down having beers, you can have all of the free time you want to ask me whatever you like.
Right.
And I said, I'm here as long as you are. And He's like, okay, great. So I was like, all right. So I got us a table over. We were in Las Vegas at a big trade show, and so I got us a table over at Beauty and Essex, which is at the Cosmo.
Love Beauty. That's so Jimlyn, my wife and I, we love Beauty and Essex in New York.
Sure, great restaurant.
That's one of our favorite stops. So if you like loud music and incredible food,
oh my
Beauty
God,
and Essex. That whole group, everything they do is unbelievable.
I love it. So we sit down, and little did I know, about 3.5 hours later, we go through at least a case of beer between three of us. His other coworker was there as well at the time, and we went over everything, all of it. But more importantly, the first hour and a half, maybe even hour and 45 minutes, was just us talking marine stories.
Really?
That was it. The rest of it was just business stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But that first whole half of the meeting or more, 60% of it was just us getting to know each other as Marines. Mm-hmm. I'd never talked to anybody like that I didn't directly serve with, ever.
Wow.
And it was just a chance that before I knew it, I was like kind of opening up, and so was he. So it was kind of like we knew something was special there, like at that moment. But at the same time, the businessman in me and the entrepreneur who's, looking to take, three things, make them one, and make it and solve a problem in the world, right? Said, okay, but you got to do your due diligence. You got to make sure things are right. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to back off for a while. And, let him take what I had to say about the business world and about being Marines in business and doing things and not doing things. Right. If he can put it together, and it was his acumen was so far more advanced than I had ever seen anybody on the design spectrum in such a short period of time.
Wow.
And I had worked with Raleigh Denim, who, based in Raleigh, North Carolina, makes some of the finest handmade jeans in the world. Really? Are made right in downtown Raleigh. It is a beautiful place to find probably some of the best artfully crafted anythings that you could possibly put together with human hands.
Right.
It's stunning.
Wow.
And to see the level of craftsmanship and to have something mirror that, it has taken them years and years and years of design and refinement to get to exactly where they're at today. Right. And to see something that even reminded me of that in somebody who was a graduate, a triple graduate from fashion school in Los Angeles, who used his GI Bill, no less, to go to fashion school, which is pretty cool.
Love it.
And to have that level of understanding and expertise in design and engineering at such an early level was just kind of, it kind of like, I really don't know what to compare it to, but somebody who kind of steps in and just automatically becomes really good at something right out of the gate. And everybody's kind of like, what the hell, man? Like, we've been working on this for 25 years, But some people can just do that.
Yeah.
It's something innate or genealogical, or, maybe it's just the planets lining up. Who knows? Yeah. Right? It's just one of those special moments. Yeah. And that and me getting along with him so well, and one thing leading to another. And eventually, we both sat down with each other, and he said, what's it going to take?
Wow.
And I looked right across him, and I didn't let it hit a beat. And I said, it's going to take everything you got.
Yeah.
And he said, okay.
Wow.
And that was after months of deliberations and talking to my family and talking to my daughter. Even she's 7 years old, and I was like, Daddy's going to have to travel, and we're going to have to do certain things. And she says, I know, Daddy, because I know that you love me.
Wow.
But it was at that moment when I realized, okay, we can do this.
Wow.
And we set down the mission, and the whole mission behind the reason Trinidad 3 Jeans exists is because we know that, like I had said before, that look, Uncle Sam spends hundreds of thousands of dollars putting people through training to be a specific thing to be a specific cog in the machine.
Yep.
And then they spend a week trying. And granted, programs have gotten better. I'm not ignorant to the fact.
Right.
There's more help today than there was yesterday.
Right.
But at the same time, what we want to do is to be a sustainable brand. Right, which is the key buzzword in apparel these days, sustainability. Right. We're recycling things and we're reusing product, and all of those things are great. But the whole point exists is because we want to be the sustainable brand that sustains people. Because we don't sustain ourselves, we're not going to sustain anything else.
I love it.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really the egg before the chicken.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to think about the genes before you get to the embryo, before you get to the baby at the end of the line, because you have to work in the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point this brand exists, is because we know so many people are getting out, and all they need is just that little hand to say, you're going to be all right, man.
Yeah.
It's not as hard as you think it is.
Wow.
Or more importantly, it's not as hard as you're making it out to be.
Yeah.
Right. So it's okay. We all have tough times. I struggle with it all the time still. Right? There's days where I, sit on the edge of the bed and I'm just like, God, and I have to say, okay, somebody else is depending on me to get my job done, and I got to force myself off the bed, and we got to do it.
Right.
But that's why this brand exists, is because even though, we know that, look, there's tens of millions of veterans out there, and you can't reach everybody, but if you can reach one, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And if that means that we have to spend a certain amount of money to do that, then we're going to do it within reason, right? You can't spend $1 million just willy-nilly, but through a force of will, we said, okay, we're going to grow this thing. We're going to expand it. We're going to, and we're going to bring our message out there to the world, right? In a real and concerted effort. Right. So we, had multiple offers for partnerships and things like that. The one that came around was from, Merging Vets and Players, which is co-founded from Jake Glazer and Nate Boyer, former Seattle Seahawk and UT Texan.
Of course,
So he's a great supporter of ours, has been for years. And then finally the stars aligned, and we're working with things with them, and Trinidad as an attendee for their weekly workouts in Hollywood at Jay Glazer's Unbreakable Performance. Awesome. So it's really kind of taken off, and we know that because all we really are striving to do is to just help each other.
Yeah.
Look, if we can do that and we can create some really cool jeans as a springboard to help that cause, that's what we're going to do.
Fantastic. So, so you guys are out in SoCal, but you're also here. Is it all the operations, everything developed out there, and then
all of our design, so I'm here. So everything kind of that's not design and production and everything that's Trinidad is handling and managing and growing at an exponential rate, which is insane, because he's essentially doing it part time while having to hold down he holds down a full time job.
Yep.
Plus he's a dad,
Yep.
And a husband,
Yep.
and he's got 2 kids. And his wife is a small business owner, which is even great because he's got an understanding and mindset for it.
Yeah.
That's beyond reproach as far as I'm concerned, which is great. And not only that is because she understands,
right?
Which is awesome. So thank you, Sonia.
Yeah.
But the whole thing that really makes it so different is because we're using our apparel as the springboard for the mission.
Yeah.
Right. We could have done anything. Look, there's easier ways to make a buck than make jeans.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we could have done anything else, but Trinidad is so inherently passionate for design and for purpose and for driving that part of his life, and he's so into it on a passionate personal level that it would be crazy for us not to.
Right.
And seeing that, look, we don't need to spend $1 billion in marketing or do all of these, which is nothing wrong if people want to do that. But the whole point is we're not here to make the coolest jean on the planet, because look, the last thing this world needs is another denim brand, right? Or another clothing brand. But the thing is what we're investing ourselves in is sustaining each other.
Yeah.
And if we're not going to do that, there's no point in recycling denim.
I love it. So now that you've kind of come in as managing partner, and really kind of now you've got to drive the vision, you've got to set up the operations. I mean, it's I would imagine that the task before you is pretty grand. So let's get into a couple of things real quickly.
Sure.
So tell me the difference between leadership and management.
Sure.
And then how do you go about putting the right people in the right spots, and then and keeping them challenged there as the leader of this organization that you're basically, it's not a startup. You guys exist, but it's kind of the startup mentality, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So really, at least for me, the difference between management and leadership, look, it's a vast one, and it can be overly simplified, which I'm going to do here because we could have an entire podcast devoted on it.
Yeah.
So if you want to do that later, I'm totally open for it. We'll have to reschedule a day to do that.
Yeah. I do want to do this. I'm going to put a plug in right now.
Sure.
I want to get you and 3 other people that not necessarily that have been on the podcast, but leaders, entrepreneurs, just business people, and let's just sit down and do a roundtable discussion. I think the audience would hear, some men, women that have done this, that have executed.
Sure.
So I'm gonna hold you to that, brother.
Go for it.
All right. So go ahead.
So really, when you're looking at management, management are generally the individuals who will tell you how, right? And they most of the time will say, you're doing a good job or you're doing a bad job, right? And managing the day-to-day things. So they're looking at, at individual, KPIs or key performance indicators for those that don't know, another big MBA word, right?
Right.
The 3-letter big word. But generally it's the how and what types, right? And those things matter more than anything else, and that's fine. There's places for everybody, right? But the leaders in leadership are generally the why people.
Yeah.
Right, they're not the what people, and when I first started to realize the differences, one in taking the things I learned in the Marine Corps, but I didn't really know how to apply that until I started to understand what why really means, and why is important.
Right.
And that was really broken to me by reading a book, a very short book called Start With Why from Simon Sinek, who's actually, that book was recommended to me from Kevin at Mizzen early on in 2013, I think, or 2012, 2013. And I was actually working in Congress at the time, driving between Cleburne, Texas and Fort Hood, listening to it. And it brings all kinds of different examples. But the biggest one that it had in there was the difference between Microsoft and Apple. And the entire concept behind Apple that Simon lines out was not what they do, but why they do it.
Absolutely.
And his tagline is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Yeah.
And Apple excellently, or perfectly executed the ultimate why with their Think Different campaign.
Yeah.
When the whole commercial was basically a guy with a stiff who they called Microsoft with a briefcase, and that's fine. And then it was, God, I can't remember the name of the celebrity's name. Zach something, I think. It was basically a kid in a hoodie and a T-shirt with a pair of jeans and like Converse.
Yeah.
Right? And that was Apple.
Yeah.
And the whole point of it just being, the kids kind of making fun of the guy in the stiff in the suit, right?
Yeah.
And the whole point is just think different.
Right.
And Simon draws out in the book, not to jump all over the place, I'm very passionate about the book. I read it every other year just as a refresher.
Yeah.
But there's a reason that when you look at an Apple computer and the individual that's looking at it, the Apple is upside down when the computer's closed.
Yeah.
Because when you open the laptop, it shows the rest of the world who you are.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And then when you look at any of the other, now it's changed because they've realized that this, even though it's a marketing play, they've realized that the Windows logo used to be upside down. The Dell logo was upside down.
Yeah.
All of these, Compaq and everybody else, IBM, right? Big Blue, everybody loves to hate for good reason.
Yeah.
They bring it on themselves. I pull no punches here, man. But when you look at it, you were always part of that group.
Yeah.
Apple wanted you to be part of the group.
Yeah.
You're not just an individual who's out there just doing your own thing in your own way. And that's fine if you are.
Yeah.
But most people who buy Apple products aren't.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
they're different.
That's right.
And they want to be.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why Apple exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't even think Jobs knew that or understood it until later on.
Yeah.
Maybe when he came back and started to really start to think about things in a different light, that he started to realize it's a lot bigger than he thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was more than, huge returns and massive sales and those were great, but he always understood that something was missing.
Yeah, no. I agree. And it's the ultimate control with the closed-in system and just his whole idea. Like, a lot of people don't realize that some of the philosophy that drove Jobs was like his father, his adopted father that adopted him, when he would build a cabinet, he was a cabinet maker, right?
Carpenter.
He was a carpenter, and he would, like, let's say he's staining a cabinet, he would stain the back of the cabinet that no one would ever see, but he knew. And so just these little philosophies that Steve Jobs took into consideration in building Apple are remarkable. So Start With Why. I have not read Simon's book. That's on my list because Simon Sinek, I discovered him probably a year ago or so. So I've listened to a lot of his talks. He's a phenomenal thinker. But I'm sure, have you read Steve Jobs, the Walter Isaacson biography?
Pieces of it. I've got through pieces of it.
Go through the whole thing. I mean, it truly is remarkable. And it's what I'm trying to figure out, and this would be a good podcast, just go through some books that we love and some figures that we like to try to dissect, is because, like with Steve Jobs, I can't figure out if he, and there's others like him, that was he so incredibly successful because he refused to ever be a part of the matrix. He just literally said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to speed. I'm going to park where I want to park. I'm going to dress the way I want to dress. I'm right. I know I'm right. And I don't care what anybody says. Is that what made him successful? Or was it, did he just have the right idea and the right partner in Wozniak that he became so successful that he had a lot of margin that most human beings just don't have? This is kind of like the perfect storm for a Steve Jobs to exist. I'm sure it was a little bit of both, but anyway, so I want to go back to leaders asking why. I could sit here and riff on the whole jobs phenomenon forever. So So let's get
so back on the leadership versus management, and what we were talking about before we started the podcast. Is something that I noticed when I went to SMU through a sponsored program from where I worked at the time at the private equity firm, a portfolio company. I found this because the two of the guys at the firm manager. Or the fund manager rather, and also one of my close colleagues, Jordan, were both graduates at SMU. And I said, okay, well, let me go check out some things. We were talking about the MBA program, we were talking about other things, and I don't have a bachelor's degree, so which means, one, I'd have to get permission from the Cox School of Business in order to go, and I have to pass a GMAT, which the first is rarely given, so you don't really need to do the second. But at the same time, I was like, you know what, let me go ask some questions. Let me just go figure out what's what. And through that, I found that they had this start a business kind of, 8-week, 6 or 8 week course that you could go through for a couple $100, and I think it's $600-700 or something like that. And my work sponsored it. They said, yeah, look, if you go, we'll reimburse it for you, no problem. We'd love to have you go. I was like, okay, cool. So I work all day, and then at night, 2 or 3 days a week or whatever it was for 6 or 8 weeks, and you go through and you learn that a third or more of the people in there were already business owners, but they were just trying to figure out whether or not either going back to school is going to be right for them to do an MBA, or just to see if they can pick up something that they're
I have some
they're
strong
missing.
Opinions on that.
Sure,
kids, go get real world experience.
That's right. Go learn that fire's hot. Go get your hands dirty. Skin your knees. Get in some trouble. Don't bankrupt your life, but get into some trouble, and figure things out, the way that you see the world. Absolutely. Right? Because you're never going to pay money to anyone who's going to show you a new reality.
That's right.
It's never going to happen, because you make everything that you want for yourself from what you do. Right? So as much as I would like to say I'm not a total movie nerd, I am. Look, there's a great T2 line from Terminator 2. It's no fate but what you make for yourself. So it's you will make a better reality if you want to. But going through the course, the biggest thing that I did notice, even from some of these business owners in the crowd, and they're successful businesses, that very few people were actually raising their hands and asking questions. And whether it comes down to fear, or it comes down to what other people are going to think if you ask a question, or whether or not too many questions have been asked, so you don't want to be the annoying guy or girl or whatever, then there's a lot of other variables, and that's fine. But what I did notice is that there just wasn't a lot of questions. And after about week 3, I started to realize it was like me and 2 other people who were asking all the questions. So I finally just quit asking questions, because I wanted to see if somebody else would pick up the flag where I kind of planted it. And eventually a couple other guys did. There were a couple of other vets there that was sponsored by a veteran nonprofit to go. But what I did notice most differently were that the ardent entrepreneurs in the room, the men and women that said, I'm going to make it, I'm going to figure this out, and nobody's going to stop me, right? Come Jesus or whoever.
Right.
That they were the ones who were constantly asking questions. They were the ones who said, well, if the professor is saying X, Y, Z, and things need to be this way, they were the first ones to put their hands up and ask why. And a lot of times there was really visible frustration on behalf of the professor. One, because I know he wanted to continue on, because we only got 4 hours to do this, so there's only so much time. But at the same time, isn't that what entrepreneurs are for?
Yeah, absolutely.
To ask why.
Absolutely.
To figure out, if there's a problem that needs to be solved, or there's a problem that could be solved, maybe that it's a problem that nobody's really aware of, which are always those great companies that kind of come out of nowhere. Right? That, that's what you're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
Right? Nobody becomes an entrepreneur and becomes successful to fall in line. Right? You turn your back on the crowd and you say, I'm going to work on something, and if people want to join me, that's great, and we'll work on something, and we're going to make life better in some way.
Well, and I tell you one of the things too that's a good tip. I love that, because like for the would-be entrepreneur out there, so Trey Bowles, who you and I both know, and is a great guy here in the Metroplex, has been successful as an entrepreneur. We both talked on this podcast about how we were the type of entrepreneurs that if we didn't know something, we didn't want to look like we didn't know something, so we just go through just kind of bare knuckle grip it down and figure it out. Go learn, go get a book. Like I think Trey's example was, he got promoted to a sales position, or asked to run a sales division, so he went and bought a book on sales. And then Nick Pensis, who owns Stanley's Barbecue in Tyler, one of the most successful barbecue joints in the entire state, has
been there a long time.
Oh man, the best pork ribs in the state of Texas, according to Texas Monthly.
Strong words right there.
I'm telling you, brother. And Nick, he sat down and he goes, man, he said, if I didn't know something, I went and found somebody who did, and I asked them questions. If I wasn't good at something, I thought, that is so profound. That's right there, man. That's the entrepreneur who gets it, because I let my ego get in the way a lot of times. It's like, well, if I ask for help, it's a sign of weakness. And so to the would-be entrepreneur or the new entrepreneur out there, what Joe is talking about is absolutely spot on. Be willing to go find somebody that's got the answers and ask. And don't be afraid to ask why, because you know what? They may be preaching something that they've never asked themselves that.
Sure. Or maybe they've never done it.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly.
Maybe they read a book somewhere because they said, oh, well, this is really profound, so I'm just going to talk about it.
Right.
That guy said it.
Right.
Well, who's that guy?
Right.
Right. What I did find most intriguing about going through that course and then finishing it and looking back on it now was that even when you find obstacles or when you find a roadblock, right? Or maybe you find an answer to a question and the answer is just wrong.
Yeah.
Well, is it really that the answer is wrong, or did you ask the wrong question?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right. But you never know until you do it. And I think it's the biggest difference, but at least in today's culture, because everybody kind of sees these tech startups. They go from, they have these hockey stick inflection points rather of success, and that's all well and good. But nobody thinks about like what it took to go from 0 to 0 or 0 to 0.5, right? I hate to rip on Peter Thiel here, but it's true.
Yeah.
They get to that point, and most fail because they're not actually willing to do it.
That's right.
Right? The whole difference being you don't get to one until you do it. You have proof of concept. It's there. It's actually done something.
That's right.
Right? And not just selling the company, but you have some sort of ardent proof of what you're doing,
Absolutely.
Right? That's your thesis.
Absolutely.
Right? To say, okay, look, we've done it.
Yeah.
We've figured it out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And everything else essentially is just a volume game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To say, okay, well, is your pitch good enough to where you're selling your story, you're selling your product, you're selling yourself, blah, 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 blah. Everything else is variables.
Yeah.
Right? It's just turning up the volume knob and trying to get it to work in an overly simplified way. I'm not saying there's a million other things that go into it. There is, but at the same time, getting to that point, the difference being those who are willing to do it and those who are willing to just sit by and talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and another good book plug there, 0 to 1.
Sure.
Amazing. Every entrepreneur, pick up a copy. All right, so last thing where I want to end this thing, with Trinidad 3, I want to know, how can the listeners support the brand?
Sure.
And, because how exactly are the veterans being supported? Is it a monetary contribution is Trinidad 3 taking a portion of the profits and helping, or do you have a strategic hiring as far as acquiring people into the business? Exactly. What are you guys doing, and how can we support Trinidad 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to trinidad3.com and you can check out the jeans that we have on there currently. There's new stuff that's going to be added up in the coming weeks, so be sure to check it out. It's www.trinidad3.com. Or you can follow us on Instagram. Another great way to find us is at Trinidad3Jeans on Instagram, which is probably the best way to keep in touch with us. See all the new stuff that's coming up on a daily basis. With regards to helping out the veterans in a direct way, we're dedicating a portion of our bottom line through everything that we sell goes to our partnership directly. So we want to have a specific percentage of that go to helping with the partnership, so that it's not just like, oh, well, wave a flag, we support vets. Like, no, this is the reason we're in business. Right. So we wouldn't have solidified the business plan and kind of kicked this thing into high gear if that wasn't going to be part of it.
Right.
And Trinidad has done such an amazing job of going out and sharing his story and getting people on board and bringing the masses to the brand. And he's, for all intents and purposes, he's a one-man Marine Corps.
Yeah.
He's had to, because I'm not going to say one-man army because we're not. But the thing being is that he's bringing so many people to the table with his powerful story, and he's got such a strong story. And he himself actually was a late bloomer in the Marine Corps. He went in his late 20s, early 30s, which is almost never happens now.
Right.
and sharing his story being a Marine infantryman, even, and smoking all the young guys and doing all kinds of, he was such an intense individual and has such an intense story. People are just naturally drawn to him.
Right.
And he's such a gifted designer. Everything just rolls into one package. So with that, though, I mean, look, if there's opportunities for us that we can, as we grow and scale, that we can hire veterans that have a skill set that suits us when we need it, yeah, absolutely. I would love to hire veterans. I'd love to put our money where our mouth is in that fact. And we're going to be scaling here very, very quickly.
Awesome.
What we're finding is that, the demand, luckily for us, and knock on the proverbial wood, that the demand for the brand is so high that people are reaching to us.
Awesome.
And we're not having to beg other people for attention or to try and sell a product, real harshly to people and wave product in their face. Look, that's not the point. That's not why we're here.
Yeah.
The whole point is to help our brothers and sisters who've, gotten out of the military, who are trying to, figure things out.
Right.
If we can do that by making a really nice pair of jeans for $169 retail, that's what we're going to do.
I love it, brother. Joe, this has been fun, man. I cannot tell you how grateful I am. And now you are a Texas Titan, my man. Anything we can do to support you in the future, I'm here.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. Look forward to hopefully having a chance to come back and chit-chat some more.
Doing it. All right, brother. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Texas Titans podcast. Before you go, I wanted to let you know where you can find us out there on the interwebs. You can go to show notes as well as listen to all the past episodes and look for upcoming shows at textitans.blog. Also, that has all the different formats that you can listen to the show on if you go there. So textitans.blog. You can also go to jasonwrightnow.com. That has not only a link to the podcast, but it also has a link to my Make Your Own Rules blog that I think you'll enjoy, so please check that out. Also, it has information about my executive coaching business, speaking, and anything else like that. So jasonwrightnow.com. That's literally just my name, jasonwrightnow.com. On Twitter, I'm at jasonwrighttx. I would really appreciate a follow. I have not been a big Twitter user, so I need you guys to help me with that. So please take the time to go out to jasonwrighttx, find me, and follow me. I'm trying to get more active with it, and so if you'll engage with me, I'll try to do a better job of engaging with you. So I would appreciate that. And then on Instagram, I'd really appreciate a follow there. I'm at Jason Wright Now. Again, my name, Now. So please follow me on Instagram. And then on Facebook, I'm also at Jason Wright TX. So check us out there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, so look for me there. I try to use as many platforms as possible to let you know about upcoming shows, past shows, and then also just anything that I find interesting. I'm trying to push it out and get better with the social media. So please check us out there and follow us. I would be most grateful. And also, please do not forget, it means the world to me for you to go to iTunes, give us a rating. Right now, we've got that 5-star rating. I'm hoping to hold that. Please, please, please. The comments that people are writing are so very kind. Thank you so much. It means the world to me. And that's how we keep moving up in the ranks. And right now, we're crushing it with downloads. The show has really had incredible feedback thanks to you guys. So I'm grateful. Please keep that momentum going by giving us a review on iTunes. Thanks so much and have a great day. And as always, I could not be more grateful for you listening. Thanks.